Hello guys, welcome to my channel Lucid Fanfic, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. Third POV. It has been some time since the day of his uncle's death. The Quirk riots, as they were now called, had come to an end, and the so-called Dark Age was a stain on the history of Japan. Most history books talked about it, but much about the time period wasn't known due to how much information was lost in all of the destruction. After they had pushed All for One back the first time from the capital, he switched to a guerrilla warfare style of assault and caused a massive amount of damage with his forces for years. However, the government held on strong and was able to push the enemy forces back and passed a lot of anti-discrimination and Quirk laws that appeased people. As such, 15 years after the date of his uncle's death, the Quirk riots had come to an end. Time passed, and a lot of people forgot about his father's existence, which was a mistake in Izuku's opinion, and no history book talked about him because the government didn't want people to be afraid that he was still around unstopped. Again, Izuku saw this as the wrong move to make, but he had no way to stop them. More years passed, and now it has been 30 years total since the day of his uncle's death, and One for All had also passed to another user, and it was now on the fourth user. The second user had died at the hands of All for One when Izuku's father discovered the truth of the Quirk. It enraged him that someone else had the Quirk that he gave his brother. Izuku had arranged for the third user to be trained by a handful of people, but the third user had found someone and passed the Quirk on since the third user had discovered where Izuku's father was one day and had gone off to challenge him. He, of course, did not survive. The second user had told the story of how the Quirk came about, and the fact that there was someone watching out for them from the shadows, and that they should expect random acts of help every once in a while when they run into problems that the Watcher finds out about. Izuku never meets with the users in person, but has seen them from a distance on the few times that he went and watched them. As such, the fourth user did know of the story and wasn't surprised when he had received help out of nowhere and was given a property to train in and had his expenses covered since he was not that wealthy. This allowed the fourth user to focus on training and doing his hero work, since he was a hero already when he received the Quirk. Though back to Izuku himself. Izuku was still gathering power over the years, and has been screwing with his father's operations whenever he found them. However, right now Izuku was preparing himself to go greet the new emperor. The old emperor had abdicated from the throne due to old age, and was in poor health. As such, the crown prince would take over the throne. The shadow guards were left on the books because normal police couldn't handle Quirk users as heroes, or the shadow guards could. As such, Izuku still held his position as the leader of the shadow guards. The duties themselves were taken care of by the vice commander, though since Izuku would always be dealing with threats to the nation or hunting down his father's operations. Izuku honestly pitied the vice commander who has had to take care of all the duties for Izuku, but there were far more important things to do, and the order from the outgoing emperor was to always focus on other things such as All for One and dealing with threats to the nation instead of the duties. The emperor said if something were anything important, then he would call Izuku since he always had his number, and he's only been called on a handful of times over the years. As such, Izuku changed into his shadow outfit and snuck into the palace and watched the ceremony. The ceremony took a while, but none of the other shadow guards noticed Izuku. Izuku rolled his eyes at this, but didn't really think much of that due to the fact that Izuku had a large number of quirks that allowed him to perform his feats. The ceremony came to an end, and all the guests except the new emperor, the outgoing emperor, and the shadow guards were left. The new emperor called all of the shadow guards out, and they presented themselves to the new emperor. The old emperor just smirked and rolled his eyes as he glanced up into the roof area where Izuku was hiding at. I never understood how he was able to find me all the time, Izuku thought. He had a theory that it was due to how often he and Izuku would meet, so the old emperor likely got used to Izuku's presence in the room, even when he hid, though Izuku did have a theory that the old man just took a guess all the time and somehow got lucky. Son, the older emperor said, and the new emperor looked over. You forgot to call for the other shadow guard. Though I'm not surprised since he's always out on the lifetime assignment that I gave him. He is in this room, though, so Shadow appears before me. Stated the old emperor, and Izuku dropped down and revealed his presence right as he landed and went into a bow before the old emperor. All of the other shadow guards went on guard and surrender the new emperor since they have never seen this person before and he had a different uniform than them. "Rise, my shadow. It's been a few years since we've last met," stated the old emperor. Izuku just raised and went to stand by the emperor. "Indeed, old friend. You look younger with age," Izuku joked. The old emperor just rolled his eyes at Izuku. The new emperor was confused as hell, and so were the other shadow guards. They saw the old emperor stand up and hug the new man. "How cruel joking about age should be off limits to you who is immortal," stated the old emperor, and that statement stunned them all. The leader of the shadow guards was immortal? "Father, could you explain what is going on?" asked the new emperor. Then Izuku and the old emperor realized where they were at. They both apologized for forgetting about them. "Hello, my emperor. I am Shadow of the Shadow Guards. I am the first underground hero and the first shadow guard. I am also immortal. I lived around 20 years before the dawn of Quirks and died my first time during Flashpoint of the Quirk riots, and was there when we pushed All for One out of the capital and retook it. After that, we faked my death so I could operate behind the scenes and screw with any operations that I come across of All for One and deal with any threats to the nation as I find them," Izuku said with a bow. The new emperor said he could rise, and Izuku did. The old emperor instructed the shadow guards to leave them so they could talk. Izuku did stop the vice commander before he left, though. "Vice commander, I apologize for you taking and doing all my duties since I'm always running around the nation or in foreign countries dealing with threats," Izuku said as he bowed his head. The vice commander waved it off and said it was fine since when Yusuke isn't around he's the one in charge anyway, so it didn't really matter to him. Izuku just chuckled at that. "I promise I will stay out of your way for the most part. The only time I ever foresee myself overruling any decision you make is if I have a strong reason for it, which I promise I will always explain to you. Otherwise, you won't have to worry about dealing with me. Just act like you always have as the leader of the Shadow Guards," Izuku stated. The vice commander nodded his head and left the room. Soon it was just the old emperor, the new emperor, and Izuku. The old emperor told the new one where to retrieve a scroll in the value using the royal ring. Soon the new emperor came back and had a scroll in hand. "Open it and confirm his identity as required by you like the new emperor. Shadow change back to your true appearance," stated the old emperor. Izuku then changed and his body and outfit shrunk a bit since he was in the form of a taller person that he had copied. The new emperor opened the scroll and saw a picture of a person, and Izuku removed his mask and kneeled in front of the new emperor. "Greetings to you, Emperor. I am Izuku Midoriya, Shadow," Izuku stated as he introduced himself. The new emperor confirmed Izuku's identity and then asked for more information about him and how he was immortal. Izuku then explained everything and the story of how the rise of All for One happened. "My father is All for One. I have an advanced version of his quirk which he doesn't know about. I and my uncle started the resistance against him before the government could get involved due to them being occupied by the fighting all around the nation. We were the first vigilantes of Japan and were the first heroes as well. I was the first underground hero when they recognized us as heroes and started to focus on my father and stopping him. Unlike my father, I can copy quirks and leave the individual with their quirk itself so no one ever notices. I died at the hands of my father who thinks I am dead. I got shot by an anti-quirk protester during the Flashpoint, and my father destroyed my heart in the literal sense. He then discovered who I was, and things happened. He blames the anti-quirked people and government for my and my mother's deaths, so that is how he fell from good to the path he is now on. I also faked my death in the retaking of the capital since my father would get curious about why Shadow keeps appearing in front of him. As such, I now operate under different names and different hero licenses to stay hidden from everyone. I don't report to the Hero Commission due to some laws and being the commander of the Shadow Guards. Instead, I report to you, the Emperor. As it stands, I'm on a current lifetime mission of just dealing with any threats I come across and destroying any operations of my father as I search and find them. I also live a normal life as a disguise so no one questions where all these new heroes come from. I only tend to create a new hero license when I create a new life and kill my old life off. I also own a lot of assets and I am rich as well due to how much money I earn from Shadow Guards, the hero work, and investments, and other things," Izuku said in one breath, and the old emperor just chuckled at Izuku, who sent a side glare and tongue sticking out. "You two act like children," the new emperor said. Both Izuku and the old emperor rolled their eyes. "Comes with the age. You will act just like us when you're as old as us. Anyway, any questions, my emperor?" Izuku asked. The new emperor thought for a while, but shook his head no. "I got none as it stands. I will keep you on the mission my father assigned you, since it will be good to keep someone following all for one's movement, since he will always be a threat to the nation. Do you need anything of us?" the emperor asked. Izuku thought and nodded his head. "I had intended to ask this of your father, but I never made my way back to the palace until now. I want to open a hero school. Currently, people have been issued licenses as they were former vigilantes, and there are small schools that are starting to train heroes. I want to open a school as well and lead it for some time. I want to turn it into the nation's best hero school to start producing better standards of heroes and better trained ones. This way we can move away from just issuing vigilantes licenses and ensure people have proper experience and training," Izuku stated. The three of them talked for a while, and soon they came to an agreement. Izuku would be issued a license to open the first actual official hero school, since the other ones are just doing it on their own without government support. Izuku would also keep the government control out of the school, and it would be controlled by him as the owner, with a school board below him and then a principal below that. This way, when the first principal dies, the owner, who would still be Izuku, could still maintain control from the shadows via other means which will be written into the founding documents and won't be able to be changed without the owner's family approval, which would only be Izuku in reality. As such, this was how the first official hero school was going to be open. It was going to be called UA High School. The school would have a department for heroes, general education, support, and management. This way they would hit all the functions of the hero needs and general population needs as well. Heroes for society, general education for general jobs in the world, support for creating support for heroes and others, and management to run the hero agencies as staff and going into other businesses as well. Izuku was asked how he was planning to fund the school, since he didn't want direct government involvement, which meant not a lot of government funding. Izuku rubbed his neck, and the emperors glared at him and asked what he did. "Hey, I didn't do anything. It's just that I take out my father's operations and other villains' operations when I come across them. That does include finding a lot of money and assets sometimes, which I've stored in my accounts, which have grown quite a lot over the years and just keep growing as I get more assets from my raids. I plan to just fund the school myself with the assets. You never gave me any guidelines on what to do with any of the assets or money that I find during my missions, so I just kept them and built a large wealth. I've invested a lot in businesses, properties, schools, and many other things. I also donate a lot to some of the local areas where I find the assets to help them regrow," Izuku stated, and the old emperor smacked his head. He indeed never gave Izuku directions on what to do with the stuff he finds. He just told him to deal with anything as he saw fit. "Fine, keep doing as you wish. It turns out into a good idea, since you can fund the school with it all as well," stated the new emperor. The old one just shook his head. They did ask him how much he had, and well, Izuku was quite rich. He had around $460 billion. Not all of it was liquid, but he invested nearly all of the money he did keep from the missions heavily in a lot of properties and small businesses that grew over the years, 30 years since his uncle's death. As such, he became a major stakeholder in a large number of thriving companies and had rental income from all of his properties. He also had investments in foreign markets as well to diversify himself. As such, Izuku was one of the richest people in the world. Through some of it was run through different companies that were really hard to trace back to him. They talked a bit more about the plans when the old emperor said he was going to retire himself to his home. "Goodbye, my old friend. I will try to make more trips back to the palace in the next few years so we can talk more before your time comes," Izuku stated. The old emperor nodded his head and gave his old friend a sad smile. "I pity to Izuku, you must watch me and everyone else go, yet you will never be granted relief," the old emperor stated as he walked away. "Indeed, I won't ever be," Izuku mumbled back with a sad smile. Izuku enjoyed his eternal life as it stood, but he knew that one day he would come to regret and hate it with a burning passion. That is the curse of the immortal. Soon it was just the new emperor and Izuku. Izuku looked at the new emperor and spoke. "I will let you decide how we shall act with each other. As you have seen me and your father became close friends. If you wish for us to become close, then we can. If you wish me to be distant, I shall. I am immortal, and time is just a blink of an eye for me, unlike it is for you. So how will you direct me, my emperor? Izuku asked as he kneeled and bowed his head. The new emperor was shocked and stunned. It was a 180 of Izuku personality from when his father was in the room. The emperor sat there and thought. He remembered the stories from his younger days when his father would talk about his loyal guard. The guard stayed in the shadows and protected the nation from so many threats without anyone realizing it or him ever getting recognition for it. The young emperor always thought his father was talking about the shadow guards themselves, but he now realized his father was likely talking about Izuku Midoriya, aka Shadow, instead. I want you to treat me as you treated my father. I don't want a cold and emotionless guard. I want the loyalty you gave my father. I want to trust you with my life, and you to trust me with your life, stated the young emperor. Izuku smirked and stood up. As you wish, Takadu. Now want me to sneak you out of the palace like your father always had me do? Izuku asked with a smirk. Emperor Takadu coughed and was shocked. He was shocked that his father would do such a thing. Shocked that he would do that? Yeah, your father was a rule breaker like no other when we were younger, Izuku said. The emperor just shook his head and sighed. No, I got too much work to do, he said. Izuku nodded his head. You have my number if you need me for anything important, or if you just want to escape the palace one day. Do note, I might not be close, or I might be in another country, so any requests might be several days out, so plan carefully if you ever need me. If it's an emergency, I will always rush back as fast as I can. Though if you don't need me today, I should go start my plans for setting up the school, Izuku stated as he stood up. The young emperor thanked him and waved him goodbye as Izuku went off to start planning for the start of the UA Hero School. Third POV. Izuku Midoriya was a man that has seen many things in his immortal life. One thing he didn't think he would see was idiot children do so much stupid shit. It's been about 30 years since Izuku had started up the UA High School, and God, people can be stupid with their quirks. It feels like every other day Izuku finds some student that thinks it's cool to use their quirk for whatever they want. As such, UA ends up kicking out an average of 5 students every month under Izuku's leadership. The school board tried to complain, but Izuku was the owner of the school and could do as he wishes. Izuku loved to see the faces of pain on their faces when he kicked people out. Izuku put in place many policies that were zero tolerance. Things like bullying, assault, high profiles of crimes, or past actions were all taken and reviewed. UA wanted the best of the best, and if you didn't shape up, then you would be shipped out. There was no if, whats, or buts about it under Izuku leadership. Outside of the school, Izuku has kept up to date with the users of One for All. Izuku learned that the 4th user had found the 5th user and was preparing them to get the quirk in the next handful of years since the power has started to grow a bit. The 4th user has held on to the quirk for quite a few years. With the 30 years that he's been running the school, it has now been 60 years total since his uncle's death. The 4th user so far has been the longest holder of One for All since his uncle transferred it without knowing he did, and the 2nd user died not that many years after his uncle. The 3rd user held it for quite a few years, but was foolish in Izuku's opinion when he decided to challenge All for One. At least, the 4th user had taken Izuku's suggestion when Izuku sent it, and didn't go off fighting All for One even when he found the next user, since it was foolish to leave the new user alone without the master to train them better. As such, Izuku was standing on a hill with binoculars in his hand, as he was looking far off as the 4th user was currently training the 5th user to prepare their body for One for All. Izuku had warned the 4th user to train the 5th user's body before passing it on to ensure they could use as much power as possible, since Izuku had the feeling as the power grew that it would take more control and muscle to be able to control it. After watching them for a bit longer, Izuku decided to get up and go do some other things. He had received a mission request from the Emperor and would need to go to the palace to get the details. Izuku and Emperor Takadu have gotten just as close as Izuku did with his father. Izuku was always sad thinking of the previous emperor. He ended up passing away roughly 10 years ago, and Izuku had attended the private funeral instead of the public one since Takadu had invited him due to how close they were. Izuku remembered being so silent that day. The previous emperor was the only other person that Izuku personally knew that was from the Dark Ages that had lived it with him. Everyone else was born young or at the very end of it, or were very old and had no connection to Izuku and had no idea of the true dangers of those times. Those older people knew of the riots and death, but didn't know how dangerous All for One was, and how the government had lost control of the nation. Most of that information was wiped clean from public knowledge. As such, the only person that truly knows everything else was the current Emperor Takedo. Not even those in the commission really knew, since most of them were younger or new and didn't have knowledge of what went on. The users of One for All themselves were operating on passed down the knowledge from each other, which Izuku didn't know what all they passed down each time, so Izuku just assumed they were clueless about most of it except the mission to stop All for One. Soon Izuku arrived in the palace and snuck into the royal office where the emperor did his work. Izuku went straight by so many shadow guards that Izuku always found himself so irritated at how easily he got in. One of these days, someone with a quirk similar to mine will infiltrate this place, and that will end badly, Izuku thought. Izuku found himself in the office and saw the emperor. Once again, the emperor knew Izuku was there. How does this family keep noticing me? I think it's just their damn bloodline, for God's sakes, Izuku yelled in his mind, but cleared his thoughts. Izuku took a pin next to the emperor and looked where the shadow guards were at. There was one outside the room and one outside the building watching inside the room. Izuku took the pen and wrote a note. It read, "I'm going to test the shadow guards. I'm irritated with how easily I keep getting inside. I want to see how they react to me appearing, so go with the show," stated the note. The emperor nodded his head and made an acknowledging sound. Izuku slipped back out the door that was left lightly opened already and made himself appeared. He ran into the office and took out a knife and put it to the emperor's throat, and soon the room was flooded with shadow guards after the one outside signaled everyone over a comms link. Soon, the vice commander arrived and looked at the intruder and took control of the situation. This vice commander wasn't the old one. That individual had retired from service a few years back, and this was the new vice commander. "Let the emperor go and you will be spared with your life," stated the vice commander. Izuku smirked. "Oh, what if I was sent in here as a suicide attacker? My life wouldn't matter regardless." "What now, vice commander?" Izuku asked, and the man tensed. The guards all looked tense. They screwed up and somehow allowed an intruder to get this far into the palace. Soon the emperor had enough and waved his hand, which stopped the show. Izuku pulled back the knife and put it away. "As you wish, my emperor," Izuku said with a bow. The emperor just took his seat, and everyone was confused. "Wow, they didn't even try to grab me when I let go," Izuku muttered, and they all broke out of their shock and went to move, but the emperor spoke up and told them to stay where they were. So let's review how badly that went. No one noticed him enter the building, which I can't honestly blame you since no one generally does. But how you all reacted during and after is the biggest problem, Vice Commander. Start an intense training to ensure everyone is up to a higher standard. Also, everyone, I am pleased to introduce you to the Shadow Guard Commander, stated Emperor Takedo. All of the Shadow Guard's eyes widened at that statement. They looked at the man and went down into a bow until Izuku told them to raise their heads. The Vice Commander bowed his head and said he would get to work on correcting their gaps. Soon they all left, and it left the Emperor and Izuku. "So what is this mission that you need me for?" Izuku asked as he sat down in a chair next to the desk. The Emperor looked at Izuku and then sighed. "This mission can be rejected. It's not critical. It's more personal. As you might know, my wife gave birth around 10 years ago, and my son wants to train his quirk and be strong. I was wondering if you could spend some more time at the palace for a few years, since I know you're planning to kill off your principal identity, and you would need a new one. You won't have to stay forever, but I was wondering if you would look after him as an uncle or something," the Emperor asks. Izuku's eyes widened a bit, and he became thoughtful. He sat in silence for a bit before nodding his head. "Sure, I can make that work. Want me to come as Shadow, or as a whole new person?" Izuku asked, and he said a whole new person. He didn't want to risk his son talking about Shadow anytime soon. He trusted his son, but he was still a young child that might make a mistake. Izuku agreed and would get to work on the new identity and find someone to replace him as principal of UA, since he would always have full control as the owner, so it was time to leave it anyway and let fresh eyes get control of the school as the principal. Izuku left and got to work on putting everything together. That is how Izuku found himself spending quite a few years with his emperor's son, who became more or less a nephew to him. It took a bit for the young boy to accept Izuku, but one thing Izuku didn't lack was time. Ironically, as such, Izuku got the boy to warm up to him and had been training the young crown prince for quite a few years. Though during these years Izuku learned that the fourth user had passed the quirk to the fifth user, who was doing quite well with it. However, sadly the fourth user ended up being found by All for One roughly a few months ago, and ended up fighting him in a remote location that the fourth user led All for One to. He did this to ensure that the fifth user was nowhere near to be found by All for One. As such, the fourth user perished. Izuku reached out to the fifth user and asked him if he had anything that he needed help with. The fifth user didn't need anything since he had already finished his hero training recently and was making his debut and would be fine. Izuku told them via the anonymous text that if they needed anything to reach out to that number. Izuku just hoped that the fifth user would live as long as the fourth user did, but no one was really making it to old ages. The fourth user was the oldest user and had died at the age of 54. This isn't young, but it isn't old in Izuku's view of normal humans, since people could end up living into their late 70s or 80s if they had a good life. Now enough about the users of One for All. Back to Izuku, as we could see him with his nephew who was playing a game of hide and seek inside of a forest that Izuku had taken him to outside of the palace with no one knowing about it. Oops, I guess I went back to my habits of kidnapping the royal family as I did with the first emperor I was close with. Izuku thought as he hid from the crown prince. Izuku had more or less confirmed that the royal family had something special about them since they always found where he was at. It wasn't a quirk since none of the quirks they have had would give them the ability to do it, so he concluded that they were just more naturally tuned to finding hidden presents. The crown prince was now 17 years old, and it's been quite a few years since I came to train him, and I think it's starting to get time for me to leave and get back to working full-time on finding father's operations. I've only found a few over the years as I've been busy with this, thought Izuku as he got found by the crown prince. After another hour or so, they went back to the palace where the shadow goers were looking for the crown prince. They saw Izuku and the prince and asked where they were. They both just said the library, and the guards didn't look convinced but had no evidence to prove otherwise. Soon they made it to the emperor's office and Izuku knocked on the door. They were called in and Izuku took a seat without bowing with shock. The prince, Izuku, always bowed. I see you've decided to leave now, asked the emperor, and the crown prince was confused. Indeed. Young Taka is old and skillful enough. I've been lacking in my main job, and I think it's time for me to return to doing it. I can't let him keep getting more breathing room since he will always be a threat to the nation and the world, Izuku said. The emperor nodded his head, and Crown Prince Taka asked what they were talking about. They both looked at him, and the emperor had the shadow guards clear out as he covered the window to block the view of the ones outside. Izuku then changed his appearance to his true appearance, which included his shadow outfit. Son, this is a secret you would learn when you become emperor, but you're my only child, and the one who would inherit regardless. Your uncle is actually the commander of the Shadow Guard, but he is also known as the underground hero Shadow. He is immortal, and he is around 100 years old now. He's served the royal family since the dawn of quirks, and will become your most trusted aide when you take my position. There are many threats to this nation and this world that your uncle deals with, and he came back to the palace to help watch you and train you for the past 7 years, but it's time for him to return to his true duties of keeping us all safe in the shadows. Emperor Takadu stated. The crown prince was shocked and asked some questions. One was if the care that Izuku showed was real or not. Of course they were real, my nephew. No matter what, I will always care for you. The only reason I'm leaving now is due to the fact that the main threat I've been dealing with has had time to breathe due to my absence. And I need to go back now. Remember, if you ever want to get a hold of me, just call the cell phone number I gave you. I will always call you back as soon as I can since I might be in a dangerous area and can't answer right at that moment, Izuku said as he hugged his nephew. He might not be blood, but he became family to Izuku. The crown prince cried a bit, but hugged Izuku back. He asked for Izuku's real name, and Izuku gave it. Just don't go saying it around. My real name is deadly if the wrong people hear it. The main threat is almost as immortal as I am, and is very dangerous. You will learn more of the secrets when you take the throne in the future, but until then you should keep your nose out of it, and keep my real name hidden to your mind only. Do you understand? Izuku asked, and the crown prince did. Soon they talked a bit more before Izuku decided when he would leave. God, 5 more years, and I will be 100 years old. Life sure has gone quickly since it's been 67 years since Uncle's death. Izuku thought as he sat in his room in the palace. Soon Izuku left the palace and got back to his work on screwing with his father's operations. After a few years of searching, Izuku had ended up finding a large number of operations and started to raid them left and right. He set up a lot of operations over the years I was away, though this just means more money and assets for me to take away from him. Izuku thought. Izuku finished destroy a building and sending his report to the Emperor, since the Emperor wanted more details of when Izuku was hitting All for One places. They were keeping more accurate tracks of where his bases were, and when so they could figure out if he was setting shop up in certain areas more than others, so they could hopefully find him and try to send the military in to end him, but every time they get close he ends up disappearing. Izuku also did keep a close eye on the workings of his hero school, and found out that it was doing quite well, and was ranked one of the better schools in Japan for heroics. Izuku's 100th birthday came, and the Emperor and the Crown Prince celebrated it with him. Izuku appreciated it, and thanked them for celebrating it since it had been a long time since he last celebrated his birthday. Izuku found no real need in the past, due to only a rare few knowing his actual birthday. As such it was long forgotten. 100th, yeah, that I've been alive, uncle, I wonder how you are doing. Izuku thought as he sat in the Emperor's office with the Emperor and Crown Prince eating cupcakes. Though it was Izuku's 100th birthday, it has only been 72 years since Izuku's uncle's death. Third POV. More years passed for Izuku, and now in a blink of an eye 30 more years had passed. It's been 102 years since his uncle's death, and Izuku could still remember those events like it was yesterday for him. Izuku himself was 130 years old, which blew his mind that he was over 100 years, but due to his quirk, he looked like he was in his late 20s or early 30s. Good thing that the quirk made me stop gaining when it did. I look old enough to go into bars in my original appearance if I ever want to. Izuku thought. Many things have happened during these years, and some were good, and some were bad. The fifth user has held the quirk for roughly 35 years now, making him the newest recorded holder for holding it the longest, since the fourth user only held it for around 30 years before passing it and dying to All for One. Outside of One for All, Izuku also had to say goodbye to a dear old friend. Emperor Takada had abdicated from the throne due to his failing health, but had soon passed away within a week of abdicating. He was younger than his father was when he stepped down, but he was still quite old. The Crown Prince and soon-to-be Emperor was now in his early 50s and would be taking the Emperor's seat. Izuku had been called back for the ceremony and was currently hiding in the roof area like he did last time. Taka had noticed him just like his father did and smirked. Sadly, Emperor Takada couldn't be at the ceremony because of his recent death. The ceremony came and went. The new emperor dismissed everyone and had called the shadow guards out. Izuku decided to stay put until Taka looked up and rolled his eyes. That means you as well, uncle, he said, and the shadow guards were confused since the late emperor was an only child. Izuku just chuckled and dropped down. I'm always impressed with you and your ancestors. You are the only ones to ever sense me when I'm hiding, Izuku said with a smirk. The guards quickly got around the new emperor, but were told to stand down. They looked confused until they recognized the person in front of them. Some of them were there when this person had done his little stunt with the late emperor, and they bowed to him, and the others followed. Emperor Taka dismissed them all and Izuku, and he talked. My father before passing said I had a ceremonial action to undergo with you. Taka asked, and Izuku gave him the instructions on where to find the scroll and how to get into the hidden area to grab it. He did it, and found a picture. This face? It's you, isn't it, from what I remember? Taka asked, and he then saw Izuku's face. You really never age, do you? Taka asked. Izuku nodded his head and confirmed it. Then Izuku got to the more important parts of this ceremony, confirming everything he knew about All for One and the threats. What all did your father teach you about All for One? Izuku asked, and Taka looked confused, which answered the question itself. Taka said he didn't know the name. Okay, I'll fill you in on everything you need to know since this has been important for the emperors to know. There aren't many left alive that know of what really happened back in the dark ages of Japan. What all do you know about that time so I can fill in the blanks and correct any information that you have wrong? Izuku asked, and Taka explained what he knew from the little records they had. Most were lost due to the fires back then. Izuku nodded his head and then explained everything as he lived it. As you know, I am immortal. What you don't know is how the Flashpoint and the Quirk riots really started. how the Dark Ages happened, and how the nation of Japan fell during the Dark Ages. Izuku stated, and the eyes of Taka widened. There was a man that started out as good, he soon fell from being good, and turned down the path of evil. He wasn't pure evil as many would say, but instead, it was a slow descent into madness. His wife was killed, and he blamed the anti-Quirk people and the government for it. Then at that point, his objectives started to change, and he started to abuse his quirk and gain power for his own personal use. His goal now was to overthrow the government, and in the end, he did for a short period of time. He ended up taking his quirk name as his name, and it was all for one. His quirk allowed him to take, give, and combine quirks as he wished, and he started groups and gathered power to rule. He led a protest which collided with the anti-Quirk protest, and it was called the Flashpoint. It was also the day I died and discovered my immortality. I soon met the Emperor, your grandfather, and he helped me greatly. He appointed me as the leader of the Shadow Guards, and my main mission was to cause havoc for all for one operation for as long as I lived. This mission contained under your father, and if you wish it will continue under you since all for one has gained some anti-aging quirk or some high regeneration that is keeping him alive. I don't think it's an immortal quirk, because if it was he would be far more active in his movement and do more actions in the public light instead of the underworld. Now, do you know what my quirk is? Izuku asked, and Taka said immortality, and Izuku shook his head. He looked at Taka and told him the truth of who he was. My birth name is Izuku Midoriya, hero named Shadow. I was the first underground hero and the leader of the Shadow Guard. My quirk is called Enhanced Copy on Paperwork, but my real quirk is an enhanced version of my father's. I can copy, take, give, and combine quirks, and all for one is my father who I have been fighting for over a century now. Though far as my father knows, I am dead since he killed me at the Flashpoint, though he didn't know until it was done. He also blames the anti-Quirk users for my death since they shot me before he landed the blow that killed me. It was then that he really started his assault on Japan and ended up overthrowing Japan for a period of time before me. Other heroes, the military, and private citizens retook the capital. So questions, nephew? Izuku said with a smile. Taka just laid back in his chair and groaned. Uncle, you are a complex man, Taka said, and Izuku just laughed at him. Now don't be like that. Where's my lovable nephew that enjoyed sitting in my lap? Izuku teased, and Taka just threw a pen at Izuku. Now you are one of very few that knows the truth of what happened back then and who I am. Not even the heirs to my Uncle Quirk know about me. Oh, yeah, there is one for all as well, Izuku said, and then explained the other quirk and how it works. Taka just slammed his head on his hands and groaned more. I don't want to be emperor anymore, Taka groaned. Izuku just laughed at him, and Taka rolled his eyes. So you can continue your mission. There is no reason I would stop that. Also, my wife gave birth a few years ago. When they are old enough, I want to introduce you to the twins. One is a girl, and one is a boy, so my son is really the only one that will find out the truth about you since he is the one to take the throne in the future due to the rules of succession going male first then female, Taka said. Izuku nodded his head. It's not surprising that he would keep doing his mission even now. It's his eternal mission after all that will never stop until his father stops, which doesn't look like it will happen anytime soon. As they were talking a bit more, Izuku's phone vibrated, and he looked at it. It was a message from the 5th user, and it read, I've found the 6th user. I've been training them for about half a year now, and will transfer the quirk soon since they are in a good physical condition already before I started the training. Stated the message with a picture and name of the future 6th user. Izuku showed the information to Taka, and he nodded his head. Soon they finished talking, and Izuku decided to go back to his hunts of criminals and any operations of all for one. As such, 5 years passed, and Izuku learned of a troubling organization one day. They called themselves the Meta Liberation Army. These individuals were aiming for free quirk usage with no real laws controlling quirk users. This didn't sit well with Izuku at all. This man did not live during the dawn of quirks at all, and he dares think they should go back to having no laws regulating quirk usage. It was ridiculous to Izuku. He quickly reported his findings to Emperor Taka, and the government quickly started to move to end this group quickly. The man leading the group was called Destro, who wanted to destroy the status quo. Soon Izuku accomplished a lot of heroes and military troops, and started raids on the Meta Liberation Army. The group did not go down without a fight. Once they discovered that the government was targeting them, they soon turned to terrorist acts and started to bomb train stations, buildings, and other things. This pissed Izuku off quite a lot. This reminded him a lot of the Quirk riots, and Izuku soon caught up with Destro's movements after several years of him running from the government forces. Destro made a stand and talked about how society was limiting their basic human rights, and that they had a right to use their quirks however they pleased. So, you are telling me that if a quirk user wanted to use their quirk however they pleased, then they have the right to kill someone with said quirk and receive no punishment. That is what you're advocating after all. Izuku said to Destroy when they cornered him one day. Destro scoffed and said no, they weren't allowed to use them to murder people, as if that was common sense. Then Izuku started poking holes, since if they couldn't use their quirk for that, then there had to be a law regulating the said quirks from doing so. This stumped Destro, but he soon just waved it off and said it wasn't the same, and that people would use their common sense to dedicate how quirks would be used in society, and that it would be fine. Foolish idiot. Idealist and thinks that humans are creatures of natural common sense. Common sense is installed into us by how society acts and doesn't come naturally to us. Izuku thought as he fought through Destro's men. Soon after a few hours of fighting, they captured Destro, who decried their arrest and that they didn't do anything. That was wrong, since they had originally raided Destro's compounds on some minor crimes that gave them a legal reason to get into them. But the terrorist attacks turned the entire organization into a villain group, which gave the government more leeway to go after them all. Soon everyone that could be caught was caught. Izuku just shook his head. It took us about 3 years to hunt them all down and capture them. We still didn't get them all, and I fear that might come back to bite us one day. Izuku thought. Soon, Izuku returned back to his normal mission of finding All for One operation, and life continued onward. However, about 3 years after the Meta Liberation events, Izuku learned that the 5th user passed away. He died at the hands of All for One, who had discovered that the quirk had been passed and attempted to kill the 6th user while he was still weak and early into his training, but the 5th user was able to get the 6th user away and hidden before All for One got to him. Another user has died. How many of them will continue to die at his hands? Izuku thought. However, there was a problem. Izuku had reached out to the 6th user, and the response he received was no a kind one. The 6th user blamed Izuku for not helping his master out, since Izuku was meant to be the watcher. The 6th user believed that Izuku should have been taking more direct actions in the fight with All for One. Izuku was shocked. He didn't understand how the 6th user was coming to these conclusions. Izuku understood that the users didn't know that he was actually taking direct actions against All for One, since he's been hunting down his operations and destroying them abroad and in Japan, but still. Izuku never assumed something like this would happen. The 6th user of One for All wanted nothing to do with Izuku. This was troubling, since this meant that Izuku wouldn't know who the 7th or any other users would be if the 6th user didn't provide the information, and if they didn't provide knowledge for the Watcher, the future wielders would likely distrust him. Though, they would likely still distrust him, since Izuku doubted that the 6th user would say anything kind about Izuku. This just troubled Izuku quite a lot, since he couldn't do much. He tried fixing the relationship with the 6th user, but the 6th user refused and continued to blame Izuku for the 5th's death, and said if he was so good at watching, then he should have warned the 5th user of All for One's attack. As such, communication between the two sides came to an end. Izuku did update the Emperor on the situation with One for All, and he was troubled by it as well. You can only keep watching and see if you can undercover whoever becomes the 7th user, and see if they are willing to work with you. Though, I am doubtful that the 6th user will make it easy for you to find the next user, so you might want to keep a tab on anyone that associates with the 6th user. Stated Taka, and Izuku could only agree with it. The 6th user has only had the quirk for about 11 years, and if he followed the past users, he would hold on to it for a few decades before he passed it along. However, that was not the case, as after about 8 more years Izuku discovered that the 6th user had passed away. Izuku was able to confirm from a video of the fight that was blurry that All for One had asked the 6th user who he gave it to, and Izuku was guessing the it was One for All. The 6th user told All for One that he wouldn't find them until they grew even more powerful, and then All for One just killed the 6th user. Izuku saved the video for his records and started his search for the 6th user, but had no luck after several years. It has been 125 years since his uncle had died, and now Izuku no longer knew who had the quirk, and that annoyed him since the quirk belonged to his family in the end. However, there was nothing Izuku could do except keep destroying anything that belonged to his father and continue his journey as the immortal hero. However, one day Izuku had discovered some weird information when he destroyed a random lab that belonged to some Rouge scientists that the government wanted to be found and arrested. This information pointed towards an illegal laboratory site. Izuku decided to go investigate the lab, and he would find many interesting things in this lab, but one more important than everything else. Third POV. Izuku had found a location of another lab from a raid he did on a different lab from some scientist that was on the run from the government. They had conducted some illegal experiments and didn't want to stop, so they ran away from the government, which turned them into illegal scientists. These scientists had some other lab that Izuku was currently heading towards. It was on a small island off the main island of Japan. As such, Izuku currently was on a boat heading towards the island. Izuku did have some quirks that could get him to the island, but he didn't want to draw attention and decided to go naturally across to the island like other travelers. As such, that is how Izuku found himself on a boat traveling towards the island with a bunch of other people. It took about 6 hours for the ferry boat to arrive on the island, and Izuku checked in at a hotel on the island. The island was called Oshima Island, and it was best known for its scenic spots and beautiful camellias flowers. However, what Izuku was interested in was the supposed lab that was hidden on this island. Based on the information that he gathered from the other lab, the lab on this island knew was hidden on one of the island sides near the sea and had a sea entrance and a land entrance. Supposedly, whatever organization behind this had built an entrance on the sea that opens and closes so they could hide the insides, but open it to receive their supplies by ships that they owned. The land entrance was supposed to be hidden in rocks near the sea, but was still on land. Izuku soon explored the area and spent the day, but didn't find it. This repeated for about 2 weeks, and Izuku was still not finding the hidden lab. It's really hidden well, or there is no lab here, Izuku thought. However, one day Izuku saw in town 2 men who just didn't fit in. They acted like they were used to moving around on the island on how they interacted with the locals, but something about them just told Izuku that they didn't belong on this island. It was how they carried themselves and acted. Most of those that lived on this island worked in the local fishing business or in other shops on the island, but the 2 men's hands didn't look like they did heavy labor work or any of the work that was typically done on this island. As such, Izuku decided to follow the 2 men all day. These men stopped at several different places, but didn't appear to be going home anytime soon. They acted as if they haven't been in the town for a while and were enjoying themselves, which was strange since if they did live on the island, then they would have all the time in the world to enjoy the local shops. After about a few more hours, the men looked as if they were done for the day, and Izuku used his quirks and hid his presence and followed them from a distance. Soon they headed towards an area that had no homes unless they had planned to walk about 8 miles to the next port town area. However, about 30 minutes in the wall, they looked around and left the road once they were sure that no one was around. This caught Izuku's interest. Seems I found some workers in the hidden lab, Izuku thought as he got up closer to the 2 men and followed closely behind. Goto thing, I've practiced me breathing and acquired a quirk that made holding my breath so much easier, Izuku thought as he remembered the increased lung quirk. This quirk provided Izuku with a larger lung capacity, which allowed him to hold his breath for longer. This was good for swimming underwater, but it was perfect for his stealth quirk. After walking about 5 minutes into the field and towards a cliff area closer to the sea, the men looked around again, and then they went behind a rock. Izuku hurried up closer and saw them pushing a rock that revealed a keypad. Izuku watched the keys they pressed and remembered the code. After the door opened, Izuku slipped in with them as he had taken another breath and was ready to discover the new areas they were taking him to. After about a 3-minute elevator ride down into the earth, they arrived at a lab. Izuku slipped away from the 2 men and started to explore the underground lab. Izuku did not like what he found. There were dead bodies of children. There were dead bodies of adults. There were dead bodies of animals as well. Izuku took a breath and then reactivated his quirk, hoping he didn't trigger any sensors. He started to read some reports that were sitting out in the open, so he didn't leave clues that he was there. The notes that he could see were talking about how they were trying to understand how quirks worked and why people got quirks as they did, and if quirks could be recreated. Izuku was pissed and discovered that this was an illegal lab that was being run by a rogue organization in the nation's military. Soon Izuku went through more of the lab, was searching to see if there was anyone or anything left alive. Soon he entered a different section of the lab and found some workers. He checked their quirks, and there was nothing he wanted to take from them, so he just ignored them since he would deal with them all later. After walking around the different sections of the lab, he heard two people talking about Subject N1 and how he was finished with all the new material that they gave him. This interested Izuku, and he decided to follow these two works and listen to them talk. After following them for a bit, they came to a more secured second of the lab, and Izuku found something quite interesting. He found some creature that walked on two legs, but looked like nothing he knew of. He also noticed that this creature had a quirk, and not just any quirk, it was a quirk called High Spec. I'm without a doubt copying that, Izuku thought as he attempted to copy it, but failed. What? Is it due to the fact that it isn't a human? Izuku thought. He attempted again, and once again the copying failed, and the creature looked up and looked around since the creature was feeling a sensation across his body. Then Izuku observed the creature picking up the books in the cell, and it started to read them. Well, this is quite interesting. I will need to ensure I get this little fellow out of here, Izuku thought. Izuku went and looked around the rest of the lab, and after exploring for about 3 hours, he found that the only experiment left alive was the Subject N1. Izuku found a spot to hide in and made a phone call. He couldn't leave to do it since based on the schedule, he found no one was set to leave or enter the place for the next few days, meaning he was stuck inside. Just hoping they don't trace my call, Izuku thought as the phone ringed, and soon someone answered. Hello, Shadow. It's rare for you to call me, said the voice that belonged to Emperor Taka. Indeed it is. That is how important this is. Do you remember the lab I raided for the scientists that were running from the government? Izuku asked, and the Emperor said he did. Izuku then explained the situation and that he found a new lab based on information from the other one. This information led to the new lab, and he discovered that a Rouge portion of the nation's military is funding the labs. The Emperor was not pleased and ordered Izuku to leave no one alive from the lab. The Emperor was also informed that only one experiment was left alive, and it was an animal with a high-spec quirk that granted intelligence that is higher than humans. I'm unable to copy the quirk. I believe it's due to its not being human. Though, I don't know what type of species it is. I request permission to bring it out of the lab and introduce it to Japanese society. I think it would make an amazing principal for my school, Izuku said, and the Emperor could hear the smirk in Izuku's voice. You just want to see what chaos the animal will cause with its existence, and how it will torment people. You really are a sadist uncle, stated Emperor Taka. Izuku just denied the claims, but got approval regardless. As such, that is how one Izuku Midoriya had gained a new companion. Izuku went to the lab area that the test subject was, and saw two workers forcing the animal into a cage to be taken to get tests done on him. Izuku waited until they had him in the cage, and stuck at that moment when they went into the blind spot of the cameras. Izuku slit their throats since the Emperor wanted all workers here dead. The Rouge military unit would also be taken care of. Body people's eyes widened when they felt their throats get slit, and the animal eyes widened as well, as he just saw two of his tormentors die, without seeing anyone do it. Then he saw his cage get picked up, and it started to move. Niza didn't know what was going on, but he kept silent. Soon they arrived in a storage room, and the light turned on. Izuku showed himself, and Nizu's eyes widened. Can you speak, little one? Izuku asked with a smile as he removed his mask to show his face. He currently was in his original appearance as a form of trust to the animal. The animal looked hesitant, but did speak. Yes, I am able to communicate via human speech, stated the animal. Izuku smiled at that. I am a shadow guard that works for the Emperor of Japan. I've been sent to investigate this place, and I've found you. All of the humans in here have been given the death order due to their illegal experiments on their fellow humans. However, you little one are coming with me as you are free to leave this lab, but first I need to wipe out anyone alive in this place and destroy it so no one can retrieve anything from this place, Izuku said. He then opened the cage door and put his hand out. The animal was hesitant that this was a trick, but he did watch as the two workers get killed. What is your name, little one? Izuku asked. The animal looked up at him and stated N1, but Izuku shook his head. That is an experiment label and not a name. For example, My hero name is Shadow and my hero name is Izuku Midoriya, Izuku stated. And one then asked for a name, and Izuku thought. He decided to take the N as the start of the name. How about Nizu? Izuku asked, and N1 nodded his head. He was now Nizu from now on. Soon Nizu got onto Izuku's shoulder, and they started to move through the lab. Izuku couldn't hide Nizu's presence with his own as such. Izuku just killed the workers as they made their way towards the front of the place. Izuku had already taken care of the dock area and had tampered with the doors so the boats wouldn't be leaving there. Soon they arrived at the front of the place, and Izuku just started working his way from the front towards the back. He also tampered with the elevator to ensure no one escaped. Nizu just stood on Izuku's shoulder and didn't bat an eye at Izuku's ruthlessness. By the way, what type of animal are you? Izuku asked. Nizu looked down at him and shrugged. I have no idea. I was born from some freak experiment of them trying to recreate life with a quirk, and boom, I was born. I think I am a chimera between a dog, a mouse, a bear. I don't know, Nizu said with a joking tone. Izuku just shook his head. Well, I know you don't have human DNA since I couldn't copy your quirk, Izuku said, and that made Nizu look at him funny since he clearly had a quirk that made him appear and disappear. Izuku chuckled. I'll tell you my story when we leave, but what you're likely thinking isn't my quirk, Izuku said. Nizu nodded his head and just held on. Izuku had slowly made his way through the lab and was nearly done. The worker in the lab just asked to be spared, and Izuku just responded that they didn't spare any of the people or animals that they used for experiments, so why should he? After about an hour of clearing the place, Izuku was done. Let's sweep the place one more time, and then secure a copy of all of the files in the main database to ensure we aren't overlooking any more labs or important information. Then we can leave this place after I blow it up, Izuku said. They soon arrived back at the main control room, and Izuku plugged in a device that copied all the documents and files. Nizu asked if he would destroy that later, and Izuku thought for a moment. Would you like it better if there were no records of this place? Izuku asked, and Nizu nodded his head. We can review everything when we can sit down and review it all. If there isn't anything really important to keep, we will destroy all the information. I promise I will destroy any information that talks about you, though. That way no one comes after you, Izuku said, and Nizu had a slight smile on his face at that, but Izuku knew Nizu was still wary of Izuku and didn't have true trust in him. Nizu, what would you like to do after you leave here? Izuku asked. Nizu didn't know. He never thought he would leave. Izuku nodded his head at that and suggested an idea, and Nizu thought he was crazy. I'm not crazy. It would be funny, and you could release some of your built-up resentment of humans on humans through weird tests and stuff. Though you can't kill any of them, you would get to let your resentment out. I would get you a hero license, and you could use your intelligence to run the school and help other heroes. Look at it this way, you could mold the young humans to be better than the past humans like the ones that experimented on you. All humans are not bad, Nizu, and I hope you will see that there is some good in humans. I've lived far longer than any human should, and I can tell you there is bad, but there is also so much good in humanity, Izuku stated. Nizu was once again filled with questions at Izuku's statements, but agreed to consider it as an option. Soon they finished getting all the documents and setting up some explosives. Izuku had a nice special missions quirk, or that is how he called it. It was called Time Touch. This quirk allowed him to touch any surface he wanted to and allowed him to set it to contain an explosive force with a set timer on it. He used this to turn almost the entire base into one large bomb, and set it all to go in 30 minutes with the time decreasing as he went around the base, so everything would sync up from the first thing he touched to the last one. The last thing he touched had a shorter time than the first thing he touched, so it would all go off at the same time. So things that were deeper in the base had a higher time amount than 30 minutes, but by the time he reached the end, it would be at 30 minutes. He then turned the quirk off and repaired the boat gate since he only removed some parts and hid them. Then he got onto a boat and drove out before sealing the door with a remote control device from the base before going out to sea to watch and wait. They waited, and in 30 minutes the entire thing went up in flames. After they confirmed it went off, they drove away in the boat and headed towards the mainland. It will take about 6 hours for us to reach the mainland. Once we get there, I will start work on getting you documents to have you recognized as a citizen. I'm going to warn you now that you will without a doubt face some discrimination when people learn that you're an animal with a quirk, but the documents I will provide will protect your rights, and you can legally sue people if they discriminate against you since the papers will recognize you as having human rights. Izuku stated. Nizu thanked him and asked for that story he was promised. Izuku smirked and then started to tell the story of his immortal life, and Nizu was truly shocked at the end of the story. So you are over 100 years old? Nizu asked, and Izuku nodded his head. You are over 100 years old fighting your own father who believes you're dead, while your uncle's Quirk is out there somewhere in a seventh user that you have no idea who it is currently, and you also are really close to the Emperor, and you call him your nephew. You also have an enhanced version of your father's Quirk as well. Does that sum everything up? Nizu asked, and Izuku nodded his head and patted Nizu's head. Good job, Nizu, Izuku said as he was rubbing his head. Nizu surprisingly didn't flinch like he expected to. Instead, Nizu just leaned into it. Nizu didn't know what was up with himself since he hated being touched by the humans in the lab, but his mind went to work and thought it was due to being saved by Izuku from the lab and putting some trust in him. I hope I can truly trust you, Izuku Midoriya, but we will see with your actions in time. Nizu thought. So, this was the end of part 2 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.